welcome to the very first episode of LightReviews, a channel that I hopefully care about for a number of months to come. So, summer's here, and what better way to kick off the season than with an anime that will surely enough cool you down during the season hot time of the year. Nagi-Asu, or Nagi-Asu for short, is an anime that was produced by the hardworking staff of PA Works, directed by Toshio Shinohara, and written by none other than Mari Okada, notable for also working on an earlier PA Works project, Hanasaki Roha. I'll be your host, Hikaru. Join me as I guide you through the dreamlike world of Nagi-Asu. The story is set in a fictional universe where humans used to live in the sea by the use of a protecting covering called Enna. This would allow them to breathe, communicate, and well, do all the normal stuff, while submerged under the sea. This feature though comes with a weakness. It has to be fed constantly with water, otherwise it will dry up and cause the individual to grasp for air, or in this case, water. Due to the desire of some humans to rise above and start a new life on the surface, we now see this great divide between humans who consist of the land dwellers and the sea dwellers. This piqued my interest due to my initial thoughts of this show having quite a complex use of relationships between characters and how racial identity plays a role in the development of each of these said characters, although things would just become a lot more complicated after the time skip, which I'll be dealing with later. Now with the premise of this show given, we now proceed to the characters. The show starts off by introducing the main characters Hikari, Manaka, Kaname and Chisaki, who are all on their way to school. However, much to their dismay, they were transferring due to the fact that their alma mater, Namichu, had shut down. An interesting turn of events led Manaka to have a chance encounter with Tsumugu, which she fell for right then and there. Tsumugu Kihara is what you would call a fifth wheel in this group of characters, and I always enjoyed watching him as he interacted with the other four. He was accepted into the group, although his presence still somewhat made them feel angst, especially Hikari, due to him knowing of Manaka's infatuation with him. Being a naturally calm and cool character, I'd always find myself wondering what his motives are as the story progressed, making me more and more interested in him. Next on the list is the protagonist of the story himself, Hikari Sakishima. Other than sharing the same awesome name as with yours truly, he's a very bright and outgoing young man. He doesn't seem to take flack from anybody, and is constantly concerned with Manaka's well-being. Though he can be a bit rash at times, you can tell just how earnest he is as a character. All in all, he served well in being the leader of the pack, making him quite a likable character. Next up is none other than the clumsy yet pure-hearted Manaka Mikaido. I'll be honest with you, I disliked her at the very beginning, but not because of her as a character, but because of how she'd be treated in the story. To me, it seemed like she'd be used as a plot device, leaving little room for her to expand as a character. This had come to light along the way as it was revealed that the sole purpose of Manaka's love for Tsumugu was to affect all the other characters, and was never really meant to blossom. Nonetheless, characters like her are necessary, but I just felt obligated to point this out. Then we have the suave Kaname, another interesting addition to the string of characters. He would play the role of a cool and logical character that would initially be the observer of the group, although he would take action when time is right in order to protect the people he values the most. Like Hikari, he himself is earnest deep down inside and just exhibits his cool facade to protect himself from the eyes of others. He was also in love with someone like everyone else in the story, though unfortunately she was in love with somebody else. However, this did not stop him from continuing to love her, only wishing for her to remain happy. Out of all of the characters, I sympathize with him the most because he seemed to be the most human. The final character among the main cast is Chisaki, who's somewhat like a stark contrast to how Manaka is in that she's more mature and responsible, and at the same time being a whole lot more distrusting towards the motives of other people. I was kind of curious at first as to how characters like her would be used in this story. Oh! As a character, she would come out as awkward at times due to her not really having a lot of confidence. This was just my first impression of her though, and it was then made clear that she was only experiencing the pros and cons of young love. Ultimately, however, her love for that special somebody would clearly remain unrequited, which only made her more interesting to watch, because then you would want to find out how she resolved such a trial. I would like to praise her though for being such a strong character later in the story. Despite this being a story about relationships, our heroes and heroines are still in junior high, which is another thing I'd like to point out. These overly used themes and settings in the story were used so perfectly that it accentuated the innocence of such a fairy tale. In essence, it was a very serious approach in presenting characters undergoing puberty. Now what it means that rather than becoming a usual goofy and comedic show that's made to cater to the desires of the general public, I found it to be a more mature presentation of how adolescents are. It also explored the more grey area of establishing relationships, that nobody was right or wrong. It was rather just a difference in ideals. A lot happened in the story, but a major factor that contributed to how interesting the story was the 5-year time skip. A thing called hibernation was undergone by some of them, which I won't go into detail for some of you who haven't seen the anime yet. The use of such a thing in a story is fairly common, but this was one of the rare cases where it was used to such an extent where the main characters would be thrown into confusion. This had shifted the tone of the show to become a lot darker than it was before. Some of the main cast were left behind while others moved on to the next stage of their lives. The ones that were left behind would, of course, be anxious due to the rapid change that occurred in their environment. They felt that they had been missing out on a lot, and those lingering feelings those characters still had within them sought answers. The ones on the other side, however, had been anticipating the return of those characters deep in their slumber. Knowing that it was 5 years later, and parts of the main cast have obviously grown in more ways than one, particularly Muna and Sayu. you. These two were just naughty little grade schools at first, but the impact they had on the latter half was something worth mentioning. Despite how the ones who just woke up from hibernation held back the story a little bit for me, it was these two who pushed through in the end to lead this beautiful tale to completion. The change they underwent compensated for the rest of the cast and pretty much made them relatively strong heroines. Also, Mina is just too adorable to write off. In terms of animation, Nagi-Asu truly is a sight for sore eyes. The colour palette in this anime is prominently set in the cooler end of the spectrum, with warm colours at times to give some emphasis to some objects. I for one am extremely happy to see the use of gradients in this anime. It made it so that the overall look of it wasn't flat. One thing that I found most breathtaking, however, was the lighting. The diffusion in light was so properly done that it almost looked like a picture, that it did not give an apparent contrast between the bright and dark areas. The character designs were what I'd call appropriate for such a story. Although the animators could have been a tad more original for the look of each character, it led the characters to be somewhat forgettable, and I guess the only standout thing for me were those two things sticking out Maneka's neck, though that in itself wasn't really anything special. Character animation wise, it was pretty fluid for the most part, especially in close-ups. However, there were times where it looked sloppy and a bit rough. There was some CG, though they were used in such a way that they blend in with everything else. Also, its use was pretty discreet and understandable, with fish in the sea and cars on the land, so no problems there. The overall sound of the anime was pretty good. Voice acting was pretty spot on, but I'd like to specially mention Mikaku Komatsu for a spectacular performance voicing Miona Shiodome. Before this anime, she only had a few major roles, being relatively new in the industry, so watch out for her in the future. Now, music for this anime was pretty appropriate, with string instruments accentuating the joyous times of youth, and deep orchestral music to mesh well with the more serious and romantic tones. I found the soundtrack to be fairly original, and it seemed to help me submerge myself even more to the world presented before me. It was as though my consciousness had been taken to a whole new different dimension. On a side note, I would like to mention the second opening theme of the anime, Ebb and Flow, performed by Rei, which really shined for me because it fit perfectly well with the atmosphere of the anime. Another thing I'd like to comment on is the amazing sound effects. The idea of a world inside the sea would count for a difference in terms of how the environment would sound like. The echoes and sound of currents were well thought out and served brilliantly well to bring a fantastical world to life. On the other hand, the subtle yet dominating sound of the waves on the surface added a touch of realism into this anime. So with all of that said and done, I highly recommend watching this anime, and in HD of course. Also, if you do have the money to spend, I suggest you buy this because it is worth every ounce of money. Otherwise, if you're lucky enough to have this on Crunchyroll, check it out there. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have, please like, subscribe and share. Also, please feel free to leave your comments, questions and recommendations on the comment sections below. Once again, I'm Hikaru from LightReviews, and until next time, I bid you all adieu.